think we have a few participants joining in. Okay, great. I think we have few participants already. We can start the webinar. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another edition of the IRENA Insights webinar series. My name is Karan Kochar and I'm joining from IRENA's Innovation and Technology Center in Bonn, Germany. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I would like to introduce IRENA and our webinar series. IRENA is an intergovernmental organization with 170 member countries, and we have another 14 countries in the accession process. We support countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future, and we serve as the principal platform for international cooperation, a center of excellence, and a repository of policy, technology, resource, and financial knowledge on renewable energy. And because our analytical work and the engagement we do with our members generate a lot of insights, we are looking for ways to share those with you. And that's why we've launched this webinar series. We have organized over 70 webinars on various topics, and you can check them on our IRENA events page. The link to that will be in the presentation slides, which will be uploaded after the webinar. So today, in the next 30 minutes, we will hear from Kavita Rai and Kushal Gautam, who will share insights from one of IRENA's reports titled Decentralized Renewable Energy for Agriculture in Nepal. Kavita is a senior program officer for energy access at IRENA, and Kushal Gautam has several years of experience leading clean energy projects across Nepal and beyond, and he focuses on agriculture and rural development while collaborating with different organizations globally, and he currently heads Quasar Energy. But before I hand the microphone to them, there are a few housekeeping items that I would like to inform. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the IRENA events page. The participants are on mute, but we encourage you to use the Q&A or the chat function to ask any questions. There will be a dedicated Q&A function at the end, so we will go through all the questions that you will have during the presentation. And without any further ado, let me welcome Kavita and Kushal to the IRENA Insights webinar series. Kavita, the floor is yours, I believe.
Thank you, Karan, for including us in the IRENA Insights webinar series. Hello, everyone. Greetings from IRENA and from Abu Dhabi, where I'm currently based. Kushal is based in Nepal, and we wanted to present an overview, a snapshot of our work on agri-food and the nexus of renewables in Nepal. We started this work sometime later in 2023 and took some time, getting to know the sector, the agri sector, because this is quite new, I think. We work mostly in renewables, but at IRENA, we wanted to work beyond the electricity sector. So sometime during COP28, we decided to launch an initiative called Empowering Lives and Livelihoods, looking at the nexus of renewables with agri-food and health. And I'll briefly give an overview of that. So why do we want to focus on the nexus of renewables with agri-food? We know that electricity is important, but we also know now that, having socioeconomic outcomes are important, and the agri-food and health sector are, I think, quite critical, purely because we know that there's a lot of 2.5 billion people are dependent on agriculture, and that 30% of energy is wasted through food losses at one point or the other. And we find this actually in many of the countries that we work in, that there's a lot of the energy sector is quite important in the agri sector, and yet the two sectors, energy and agri-food, very often do not come together and work together, right? So I think this is a new step that at IRENA we are taking. And how do we look at energy not only in terms of electrification, but also in terms of productive uses? sometime, I think before with FAO, IRENA had produced a report, and we looked at the agriculture value chain and where, there are various energy entry points from input all the way to the end user. So using this sort of framework, we are also looking at various at our initiatives, looking at into various agriculture value chains and what the energy entry points are. Karan, next slide, please. So this was the initiative that we launched at COP28, and we really wanted to look at to connect people and improve livelihoods through renewables. One of the important dimension was that we wanted to look at it not only from, whenever we talk of renewables or energy, it's mostly looked at from a mitigation point of view, but we also wanted to look at how can we improve adaptation and resilience, because that's really at the heart of people's livelihoods. And how can we also catalyze the systemic energy transformation of agri-food and health? So these were some of the overall incentives, I think, for us to work in the agri-food sector. Currently, we are working in about 13 to 14 countries. In agriculture, as you can see, we're working in about 9 countries at the moment, mostly in Africa, just 1 in Nepal, and 1 in Cuba, and some in the small island states. We also have a similar initiative, but working on health, and currently we're completing about 5 assessments. The whole idea for the initiative was to really look at not just an assessment. And IRENA, we do a lot of analytics and we do a lot of assessments, but it is to look at, what do we do beyond an assessment and how can we help our member states to think in terms of implementation. So at the moment, the work that we are doing in Nepal, we're still at the early phases of assessments, which has been published, and the report is available on our website, and you can have a look at that. And the next phase is really working with partners on the ground, with governments, and see if we can develop larger programs and find funding for implementation. So that's the eventual goal. It's a small, it's a long-term goal. The process is a bit slow because funding is limited nowadays, particularly in the current climate. But we are really trying to see how we can develop larger programs. And it's a step-by-step process where we, at the assessment phase, we work with the ministries of energy and the respective Ministry of Agriculture or Health. In the case of Nepal, we worked very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry and the Alternate Energy Promotion Center. We did a workshop, and we're in the process of discussing what the next steps would be. Next slide, please, Karan. So I think briefly, I wouldn't go much into the detail, but we know that the agriculture sector is very important, like I think in many other countries, in Nepal as well. It contributes to 24% of the GDP and really 62% of population's livelihoods through income and food provision. And we found through our studies, over 50%, particularly women, are reliant on basic agriculture in Nepal. And therefore, at the heart of our work on empowering lives and livelihoods, we also wanted to look at how we can improve livelihoods for women in particular, and also for youth. In terms of the national energy consumption, agriculture sector makes up only 1.6% of the national energy consumption. So it's not very high, but within that as well, there is a strong reliance on diesel at 90 or almost 91%. And solar or renewables, the use of renewables is fairly low, mostly on solar irrigation. And I know that Kushal will, explain a little bit about that, of what we found. Mainly, I think the country's agriculture mechanization priorities are taken up through the policies of agriculture mechanization promotion policy and the agriculture development strategy. And under the agriculture development strategy, I think there are a few inroads of how energy is also also comes in. We know that as in many other sectors, especially in renewables as well, that farmers have limited access to affordable finance, but not only affordable finance, I think we've also found that access to technologies, renewable energy technologies, or or mechanization or products have also been very limited, and this is I think needs to be worked at, I think, particularly in Nepal. We also found that there was potential to increase the export of productions, provided there is higher yield. But we found that post-production, like cold storage or processing facilities, the availability of it is still limited. And this was a bit surprising. We thought that there would be a lot more of a market, an active market, but this we didn't find yet. The next slide, please, Karan. So in each country where we work, in the 7 or 8, 9 countries actually on agriculture, the agriculture sector is quite huge. So at IRENA, we try to limit ourselves to just about 4 to 5, sometimes 3. In Mauritania, for example, we're only looking at fishery. We have some priorities where we look at priorities of the government, for example, but from the IRENA point of view, we also wanted to look at resilience and adaptation. So we chose, for example, millet, which is more nutrient dense and climate resilient. Also, a lot of households, grow millet. So we also took millet and chose just 4 commodities, agri-food commodities: maize, apple, fishery, and millet. This we worked very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture and their Prime Minister Agriculture Modernization, the government's Prime Minister Agriculture Modernization Project, which has already identified 15 commodities. And we discussed with the project as well as the ministries, and we came up with this list of 4, looking at market, but also looking at how can it better the livelihoods of women in particular, and also looking at it within the climate change context. Because very often I think we got the feedback that millet is really, not as much, does not have a big market, for example, and even fishery compared to maize or rice. Yeah. Over to the next slide, please. So what we found really that most of the equipments that is being used in the agriculture sector are diesel powered. And except when it came to solar irrigation, and I think many of you who are present here, for example, from Nepal, also have worked quite a bit, I guess, in the solar irrigation sector. And there is a lot of prospect for it, but there is still a lower usage than what we had thought it would be. Most of the equipments were found in the production stages, were mobile, but they were either attached to a tractor. Therefore, I think they were mostly diesel powered. But there is also a lot of opportunity in the non-mobile, post-production stage, where particularly like looking at cold storage or solar dryers, where I think Kushal will go into more detail. We also found that there was an increasing migration. I think like in many developing countries, in Nepal, there is quite a high migration of males, even females now, I think, but they are also leading to many more women-led households, right? So they are underscoring, the importance of gender inclusion in DRE and agri-equipment. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done around this field as well, and looking at particularly how women and the youth, for example, can play a bigger role in terms of any programs, for example, in the future that will be done, or even in terms of government policies that might impact them long term. We did an estimate of some of the market potentials. Maybe Kushal can go into a little bit depth on that, but it is much more detailed in the report. on how this was done. But basically, as you can see, maize and millet, obviously, there's a larger market potential, and this market potential is mostly for renewable energy equipments and technologies rather than the market of the agri products itself. And fish and apple are a smaller market, but they are also, there's also a lot of prospect around there. I will also hand at this time over to Kushal, who can explain a little bit about the field experiences within this sector and what could be done. And maybe at the end, we can discuss a little bit more on during the Q&A session on what next. Kushal, over to you.
Great, thank you, Kavita. Karan, can we go back to the slide? Yeah, thank you. Just adding to the estimated market potentials here, the way we estimated this is based on the possibility of equipments that could be powered by decentralized renewable energy in the short term. So we categorize that based on the current equipments that are being provided to farmers from the inventory of the agriculture equipments that are provided. And we categorized them, and then we looked at the energy required. Again, diesel being a large portion of the energy input, and looking at how decentralized renewable energy and what types of decentralized renewable energy can cater to different equipments. Of course, there's a lot of parameters and detail that goes into it. So the detailed methodology is provided in the report, but that's briefly on how that number comes from. Now I'll focus more on some of the field findings and the key technologies that come into highlight. There are more technologies that I talked about in the report. The first one here is for irrigation. We have solar irrigation pumps. Solar irrigation pumps have become quite popular in recent years in Nepal, and has reached really areas where there's either no access to grid or the reliability of grid is very poor. What you've seen in the field is now when we think of solar irrigation pumps, I think we should not think of solar irrigation pumps in isolation, but we should think of them with the grid. And the reason for that is what we found in the field was in areas, in a lot of areas, grid is rapidly expanding because the utility grid here is aiming for 100% electrification. So there's a lot of expansion of grid, and previously where there are solar irrigation pumps, grid reaches them, and farmers, they either we've seen farmers who either install a changeover and they operate the same system with either grid and solar, or what they do is they discard solar irrigation systems and they install another pump and it's powered by grid. In either case, farmers are making changes, but it also sends a message to us saying that, okay, when we go forward with solar irrigation pumps, we shouldn't just be thinking of them as in isolation, just being powered by solar, but also having provision to be run with the grid, either on hybrid systems where farmers can switch between solar or grid. Or we also know that in a lot of research that the actual utilization of pump over the year is quite low. So there's a lot of wasted energy and a lot of potential for that utilized. So even grid-connected solar irrigation pumps could be the way ahead. The other technology that I want to highlight are cold storage. So we saw a lot of cold storage in almost all of the value chains that we visited. In cold storage, we found that energy in itself is not a limiting factor. When we talked to the committees who are operating it, we saw that there's a lot of conflicts in management and lack of clarity on how they want to operate it, what kind of produce, how they're going to store it, the pricing, how they reach out to farmers, and having all the technical knowledge of operating the cold storage, depending on the type of produce they're storing. So we saw a lot of lack on that. Energy, yes, in areas where even the grid was poor, there was cold storage and it was not operating. But we think that energy in itself is not a limiting factor if given that there are other priority operational aspects that needs to be sorted out. Then the other area that we saw was on solar dryers. During field consultations, we didn't find actually a single solar dryer that farmers were operating in these value chains. But every time we talk to the PMAMP project, that's a Prime Minister Agriculture Modernization Project, and the custom hiring centers, the cooperatives, they keep bringing up solar dryers. And when we ask them, okay, what is the challenge there? They say that for individual use, it's quite expensive. For commercial use also, because of the variation of energy input in solar dryers, the technicalities that goes into maintaining the moisture content and so on is quite difficult. So it hasn't commercialized, and for individual levels, it seems quite expensive. So that's an area that could be utilized, but they see that, okay, drying is a challenge. There were areas where they were using diesel dryers, but without volume of produce, the per unit cost comes quite expensive when using diesel dryers. So solar has a potential there, given we need to find a more innovative way or economical way to actually deploy them on the field. Next slide, please. So it's kind of emphasizing that with more clarity here. In off-grid areas, we see that with grid supply, as grid expands, we see that DREs have the potential to kind of supplement the grid and make it more reliable. There were areas where there was a lot of outages, even though there was grid. So in that case, farmers, for example, in fish value chain, they were using aerators, but they were using solar pumps for aerating, even though there was grid, because they needed constant aeration of their ponds, and they were using solar for that, even though there was grid. So there's a lot of potential for DREs, even where there's grid, to make the grid more reliable, or the energy to the user more reliable. So in the pictures there, we see portable irrigation pumps, threshers, small threshers, and bubble dryers as well. So yeah, next slide, please. On the apple value chain, we see that for this, we went to Jumla, which is a higher altitude area in the hills. So it has a lot of production of apple, and it's very well known. So there's a market value for it. What you see there, there's a lot of opportunity for mechanization, but here the grid energy is very poor, and there are micro hydros being built. This is in 2023 when we went to the field. And we found that, okay, there's a lot of areas for mechanization, but they had to rely on manual labor, even though the produce actually the produce has a high value over the entire country because of how well known Joomla's apple are. But they have to rely on manual labor, and there's a lot of opportunity for mechanization. When it comes to mechanization, then it comes to a reliable energy that we need to input. And that's where renewable energy can supplement. Yes, the grid will be strengthened in the coming years, but with renewable energy, I think they will have more assurance. The enterprises that are operating there will have more confidence on the equipments that are running. So with a renewable energy integrator, for example, for roller graders, pulp makers, apple peeler and slicers, these even juice makers, the small equipments, they can be powered by renewable energy. It at least gives confidence to the enterprises that, okay, we have reliable energy and they can ramp up production. At the end, it helps on the income sides of the farmers and the enterprises operating there. Next slide, please. Here, I'd like to talk about the methods through which the agriculture equipments is currently reaching the small enterprises and the farmers. On the left, you'll see the rental model, which is mostly run by the privately run CHCs. CHCs are custom hiring centers. So they are centralized areas where it could be an individual. So they have some farming equipment that they lend out to farmers. Depending on the season, different equipments are lent out. And yeah, that's how they run. And even through there, we can see that DRE solutions can be deployed through the same channel. For example, small threshing machines, which individual farmers don't need to own, but they can be centralized and they can pay per hour to run these equipments. They can access through these privately run custom hiring centers. Just an upgrade of that is the box on the middle, which is the sales and rental model, which can be run by cooperatives, which are running the custom hiring centers. So these cooperatives can not just only provide equipments for rental, they can actually also provide agriculture inputs like agrovids too, different inputs from the production side, seeds, fertilizer, and so on. So they can keep adding value. And they can also provide renewable energy solutions that are powering small equipments through the custom hiring centers, which farmers and small enterprises can access. So these are all existing models. And the third model is outright ownership, which is basically commercial enterprises and industries, and the agri equipment is basically just bought from them. So these are existing models. So we don't need a separate DRE model to channelize them. We have customer hiring centers and which are run by private or cooperative, through which DREs can be mobilized. Next slide, please. So here, what the overall recommendations that we have is there needs to be a lot of government coordination here, all levels of government, central, provincial, and local governments, because the need comes, the actual understanding of the local needs comes from the local governments, which is then aggregated by the provincial government to design programs. And again, based on the provinces, central government can support the provincial government as well. There needs to be a lot of coordination, because right now we're still pushing mechanization, and energy actually comes after mechanization. So that is one thing that we learned. We keep thinking of DREs as the solution, just push, 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 but DRE can only be pushed if there's mechanization. So as mechanization is pushed, then the energy input comes in. Then we have the understanding of the geographic context and the type of equipment. What we saw in the field is some of the equipments were being promoted in areas which break down very quickly, and they have lack of operation and maintenance. So the equipments are just lying there. So knowing the geographic context on what type of crops and what kind of equipment can be provided, and how do we provide service for this equipment in the long term as well, that thing needs to be thought of. Then the third point is supporting the market mechanisms around high potential opportunities for DREs, and not just thinking of DREs in isolation, but thinking of them incompatible with the grid as the grid rapidly expands. Then again, it's the awareness and enhancing the capacity of utilizing DRE, and even the crops that are actually processed through those DREs. For example, I mentioned solar drying, and for maize, you have a certain moisture point that you need to reach. So without that understanding, the user will probably think that solar dry is not working, but they need to know, okay, the moisture content and all that levels. So that capacity utilization, that capacity building also needs to come in. On the technology side, there's opportunity to scale up solar irrigation again, but also thinking of the grid. Otherwise, farmers may just opt for the grid when it's there, unless there's no grid at all. Then again, solar dryer, there's a potential for there. So just reiterating that, there's an opportunity here. Then third point is maximizing the use of existing DRE power mini grids, which can be hydro or solar, and extending that to promoting of agriculture enterprises around the region. The last point is DRE power cold storage, but that has to come with a lot of technical feasibility on the appropriate location of cold storage and its operational efficiency as well. Of course, these are really high-level recommendations. We have more detailed and more technological specific recommendations on the report. So I'll stop here considering the time, and I think we can open for questions. Thank you. Over to you, Karan.
Thanks, Kavita. Thanks, Kushal. I will now move to the Q&A. I will have to stop sharing my screen because it's hard for me to kind of moderate and have the screen open at the same time. But this way we can see each other better. Okay. So first of all, thank you for the presentation. It was very insightful. We encourage our audience to use the chat feature or the Q&A feature to ask. I already see a few that are already here. We don't have enough time, so we won't be able to go through all of them, but maybe I have shortlisted 2 questions, one for Kavita and one for Kushal. And if you could be very brief about them, so we finish on time. Kavita, the first question to you. So you mentioned that the IRENA is working on the whole renewable co-benefits on agri and health, and we are working with several countries at the moment. How is the selection procedure for this country? How do we select where we want to work? Is it based on member country interest, or do we also propose to countries on how they can integrate, or how we can add value to their existing work?
Thanks, Karan. I think many of the countries depends, of course, on the member countries' interest. IRENA, as the secretariat, we usually get requests from member countries. Once the initiative is announced, then member countries will come. Once we also have our usual biennium work programs where we generally say these are the initiatives, so this is the area of work that we want, and member countries often reach out to us, and we work accordingly. Sometimes it can also come to us as bilateral meetings with our Director General, or in areas or in continents that we want to work. We also see sometimes there is specific need to do more in some countries than others. So we also directly or take a proactive approach in reaching out to various member countries, and we go on from there.
Thanks, Kavita. I see more questions coming in, but I would maybe like to close this by asking one final question. Kushal, you had mentioned that you need to push mechanization and DRE at the same. But are there any business models that we can do this together? Because you said that first we need to mechanize and then DRE comes into play. But is there a way where we can do both of them together, for example, through privately run or CHCs?
Karan. That work is currently being done on ground. Like I mentioned, the PMAMP project, the Prime Minister Agricultural Project, that's where we got that input from. So they are supporting mechanization. They are orienting farmers towards more efficient methods, going away from manual work. And so that is, they say that's still in the nascent phase. So we still need a lot of push there.
Okay.
And then as that grows, how do we go into renewable energy and how we can support it? Is it okay if I just quickly answer some of the questions that I see in the chat?
Sure.
So one question regarding APC's previous efforts on solar dryers. There's still subsidy provision for solar dryers. Unfortunately, it has been stagnant. Looking at the data lately for the last 3-4 years, it's almost flat. Very low support on solar dryers, and it could be because of maybe low demand or in the market. A lot of people don't know about this. So even or for solar companies, it doesn't make sense for them with subsidies to reach really remote areas. But the fact remains that it has been flat. But a note here, a roadmap for solar thermals has been published by APC this year. The other question that I will answer is the last one on the solar indicators and its challenges in the overcast days. As energy storage solutions, the first thing comes battery, but battery is very expensive to maintain when we're talking about really remote areas or out in the field and maintaining them. In terms of solar energy storage, you can kind of convert that into water storage, right? So you size the systems based on where you store the water, and you can utilize it in the late evenings or in the early morning. So yeah, just some questions that to answer. So yeah, thank you.
Great.
Very quickly, I think I'm just looking at the chat as well. I think for Sagarji, we have been in touch with APC and we worked directly with them on the report and throughout this process, as well as with the Ministry of Agriculture. So yeah, there is, unfortunately, in Nepal, there has been a lot of efforts, but they have been few and far between, and they have not been very successful. So one of the things that really is important as we move forward, implementing agencies on the ground, I will request you to do a more thorough market assessment, because later on when we went into, for example, looked at cold storage, there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of technology, in terms of policy, in terms of, providers, business models. So there are a few being implemented, but unfortunately, many of them are also not successful. So I think this needs to be looked at more. So in fact, when we looked at programmatic design, we felt that maybe Nepal, it's not the right time now to do a large program, but maybe do I know a few very good organizations on the ground are doing pilot projects, and I think the lessons need to be learned. But generally, this is not only in Nepal. This is what we are finding out in Africa as well. And there's a question around IRENA playing a role for arranging concessional financing. I think this is an area that we are trying to get into programming, and also trying to influence, investors and funders to go more into the agri or productive use sector. And hopefully we will be able to do more. But yeah, thank you very much for your questions. And I
Great.
hope we have answered all of them between Kushal and me.
Great. Thanks, Kavita. Thanks, Kushal. Unfortunately, our time is up for today. We are actually running a little behind, but I would like to thank the participants for staying back and till we answer all the questions. I would also like to thank Kavita and Kushal for their time and for sharing the insights on this piece of work. We hope you guys learned something new. The recording and the slides will be posted on the IRENA events page for those who missed any part of the webinar. And I wish you a great rest of the day ahead, and hope to see you soon in the future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.